Hi! This week I'm going to be doing a book review of Philip Pullman's The Golden Compass. Anybody who knows me knows that The Golden Compass and the trilogy His Dark Materials is one of my favorites. It was really the book that got me started writing. I'd been wanting to write before that, but my first real good idea for a story came out of The Golden Compass. And so I read it when I was in middle school. I haven't read it since then, so let's see how it holds up to nostalgia. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read it. If you haven't read it, go read it and then watch this video afterwards. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is the characters. So I chose 5 of who I thought were the main characters in the story. So the first person I'm going to be talking about is Lyra. Lyra is the protagonist, and I don't think she has that much character, to be quite honest. Like, she is likable. I think she's very much a young, wild, half-wild girl, they often call her. How I tend to see if a character is three-dimensional or not is if I were to play the game The Sims 3 to be precise, I would have to choose 5 traits to make them a sim. To make a sim out of them, you need to have 5 traits. I don't know what my 5 traits would be for Lyra. I can't really think of any if I have to go based off, brave. She's brave. That's really it. That's her. Like, that, lying, she's stubborn, but like that's it. That's not a character, really, I don't think. So I think that Lyra is not even really a character in a lot of ways. She is more the lens through which the reader sees the world. We see through Lyra's eyes with Lyra's mindset. This is strange because it isn't a first-person narration, but it still comes across that way. It's a lot like Bella Swan in Twilight, a lot better written, but very similar in that with Bella, she could be anybody. She is so bland and boring. She could be anybody. Lyra's not quite that bad, but Lyra is very much a kid, and that's really her thing. She's a kid. So it's almost like if anybody were to revert back to how they were as a child, that's kind of what it's like. So I feel like she's more of a lens than an actual character. And of course I can't talk about Lyra without talking about Pantaleimon, her demon. And to talk about Pantaleimon, I have to talk about demons. I think that demons are so cool. I've always wanted to have a demon. When I was little, I took a quiz, and it was like a really in-depth quiz on the Golden Compass website, and it told me what my demon would be, and it wasn't like a question like, what's your favorite animal, blah, 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 and there wasn't like 5 options. I did this quiz for like everybody I knew, and everyone got a different one. And I got an ocelot, and I didn't know what that was, and so I Googled it, and I think they're the most adorable animals ever. How fun would it be to have an animal with you all the time that could talk to you, that was basically just another extension of you, and you could talk with it, and if you were talking to someone and you were trying to figure out how they felt about something, all you had to do was look at their demon. Is their demon look happy? Is their demon look sad? I feel like it would make communication so much easier. Plus, it would mean that if you were in a fight with somebody, you don't have to do anything because your demons are going to fight for you. And I feel like we get more of Lyra's character through Pan than we do through Lyra, which is kind of helpful. Because like I said before, Lyra is not super three-dimensional, and Pan really helps with that. We can kind of see what she's feeling by what Pan says. But in the same way, Pan is her opposite. When she wants to go hang out in the retirement room, he's like, no, 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 no. But that he's almost like her conscience. Her conscience is trying to tell her to do the right thing. It's just a very interesting way of looking at a character. The next character is Roger. So Roger's not even really into the story that much, and again, I don't really think that he's a very fleshed out character. The reason I want to talk about Roger is not because of his character, but because of his role. He is Lyra's motivation throughout the entire thing. Even when she forgets it sometimes, she always comes back to, I want to save Roger. Every time. Every time she's trying to convince herself to keep going, it's Roger she thinks of. That, I think, is really Roger's point in it, but that does mean that when we're supposed to feel sympathetic about Roger's death, I don't. Quite honestly, I didn't even know what happened. Lyra, her heart beats, leaping in anguish with Roger's, tight clutching hands, his body suddenly limp in hers, and high above the greatest wonder. That is literally all they say about Roger's death, is his body suddenly limp in hers. That's it. That's all they say. I felt more sympathy for Tony Macarios than for Roger. Like, in a heartbeat. Like, I wanted to cry when I read about him, like, holding the fish with his demon. Both times I read it. Roger, both times I had to read the section again and make sure he was actually dead at this point and not just, like, passed out or something, because they only say limp in her arms. That is literally it. So the next two characters I want to talk about are kind of the villains of the story. So the first is Lord Asriel, and I guess he's not really a villain until the end. He actually is kind of a surprise, which is good. It's a very much a unexpected twist, and it really is unexpected. I mean, there's foreshadowing towards it. They talk about Lyra's betrayal. There's the whole, like, I did not send for you thing. But in general, you don't really know what's going to happen until it does. I just wish that we could have gotten to see more of Lord Asriel than we did, because I feel like he's a really cool and strong character. He could be. And he could be so complex, and if we knew even more about his backstory than we do, that would be so cool. I almost wish there was another book written just from Lord Asriel's point of view, and I would read that. And then the next villain is Mrs. Coulter, and she's, again, kind of one of those you don't fully expect it, but her revelation to be a villain is slower. Well, I mean, we know from the beginning that she's taking the kids. Lyra doesn't know right away. The way that Lyra finds out is a bit slower. There's her demon's kind of creepy. I think he's in my room. She's letting her demon fight mine, and she's really cold and calculating. And then at the party, I mean, it's a little bit slower and more drawn out. I think she's a really good villain. I think she's a perfect villain for a kid because she's unpredictable. Like, one minute she's sugary sweetness, the next one her demon's attacking you, and she's just like, nope, you can't wear that purse. And also she lies. And so both of those things are really scary for kids. So I think she's a perfect villain for a child to have. Also, I think her demon's really cool. And then the last character I want to talk about is Yorick Bernison. He's by far my favorite character. I think that he is just, like, so cool. I love the idea of the armored bears. Like, you don't see that very often, things like that. And I just think they're awesome. Their armor is cool. The way that their, like, system is run is cool. All the rituals. It's just, like, amazing and so unique. Like, you don't see something like that anywhere else. And when I read Yorick, I can see him and I can hear what he's saying. And he's just so powerful. It's just, like, he is by far my favorite character. So now the story. What do I think of that? I do like the story. It's very interesting. I get into it within the first chapter. Like, you are hooked pretty much right away. And there's a lot of good suspense. There's this whole thing, there's, like, a lot of prophecies and stuff like that, which is actually a good reason to read it twice. Whenever there's prophecies being fulfilled in a book, I think you should read it twice. One, not knowing what the end result's going to be, and then once having already read it, you kind of know and you're kind of picking up those clues. Because I got to do that this time, and that's really fun. But because of those prophecies and that foreshadowing and stuff like that, it means that there's a lot of good suspense built up. And it's a pretty good payoff. Like I said, Roger's death isn't that great, but the other stuff is good. The ending definitely makes you want to keep reading the rest of the series. The other interesting thing about the way it's set up is that it is really a 3-act story within a 3-act story. Because it's part of a trilogy, it's a 3-act story, and this would be the first act. But there's also 3 acts within it. There's Part 1, Oxford, Part 2, Bolvanger, and Part 3, Svalbard. So I just think that's really interesting that he would choose to split it up that way, and I think it works pretty well. It helps you to orient yourself and to kind of know what that section is going to be about. I also want to talk about writing styles. Even though this is the book that made me want to write, I don't particularly like the style in which Pullman writes. The world building can be good, but it can also be bad. He does a lot of things where, like, he'll say something like, as Lyra held her breath, she saw the servant's demon, a dog like all servants' demons, and then it goes on. I don't think you need that, in parentheses, a dog like all servants' demons. I think you show that by having all the servants have dog demons. I don't think you need to outright tell that, especially, like, I know this book, he wanted it to be for, like, kids, but it really isn't. Like, I mean, it isn't not for kids, but there are going to be a lot of adults who read it too, and it's almost condescending. It's almost like he doesn't trust his readers to be able to figure that stuff out on their own. But then sometimes it's great, like, you are just completely immersed and he lets that stuff happen. He does what I want him to. I just wish he'd done that a little bit more. And he does that other times too. He does a lot of telling, not showing. For example, the visitor mentioned by the master, Lord Asriel, was her uncle, a man who she admired and feared greatly. He was said to be involved in high politics, in secret exploration, and distant warfare, and she never knew when he was going to appear. He was fierce. If he caught her in here, she'd be severely punished, but she could put up with that. That whole paragraph doesn't need to be there because later he shows that Lyra admires him and that she fears him. He shows that Lord Asriel does these different things during his little presentation. And he shows that if he caught her, she'd be in huge trouble because that happens. So why do you need to have that in there? It's unnecessary. But there are sometimes some really great descriptions. The descriptions of the aurora are really pretty. They make me want to go somewhere in the north to look at the aurora. The description of Mrs. Coulter's demon is really good. The description of Lord Asriel's demon is really good. There's a lot of good descriptions. And so those were really nice. I liked that a lot. But sometimes I tend to hear Pullman a lot, and that's not good. You don't want to hear the author. For example, he will start all of a sudden randomly talking about how Lyra's not imaginative. She just lies. And it's like going on and on about how imagination and lying are different. And also some of the moral stuff in here is Pullman. It's not Lyra, and it's not the story, and it's not necessary. He's just trying to tell you something, and I don't like that. And then I'd be remiss if I talked about the Golden Compass and didn't talk about the whole controversy with the Catholic Church. The thing is, I don't really read this as Christian literature. I mean, I know it is. I don't really care. Because if it's a Christian story, it's not a very good one, I don't think. I mean, obviously this is all my own opinion, but if it's a Christian narrative, it's too much Pullman trying to push his ideas on people. If it's just a fun story, then it's just a fun story. And sure, it has a lot of interesting things about growing up and adolescence, and it does have some stuff about the church, but if its main point is to have a message about the church, I don't like the book. But if its main message is to be a good read and a good story, then I do. So I like to not think of it too much as a Christian narrative, but I also don't think that you shouldn't read it because you're Christian or that you shouldn't read it because you're not, because I think it can really appeal to anybody, and I do think it's a good story overall. So I give this book 4 stars out of 5. It's definitely a good story. Like, even though the characters are kind of lackluster and the world building can be difficult at times, the story is what really keeps you going. You don't want to put it down. You just want to keep reading and reading and reading, and trust me, I did. And I mean, I guess there's probably some nostalgia in my rating as well. I'm not a perfect person, and I know it's not a perfect book, which is why I didn't give it a 5, but it definitely is a good one. So for that reason, I give it a 4. If you guys have any thoughts about Golden Compass, differing from mine, agreeing with mine, whatever, any thoughts at all on anything I've said, please leave a comment. I'd love to have dialogue going. Other than that, see you next week. Bye. So this week I moved up to college. So I moved up last Thursday, so I've been here almost a week. And so that's what I want to talk about today, my first week of college and how it's been going and stuff like that.